We'll continue with part 9 of Federalist number 10. For those of you who are accidentally watching this video, this is just a reading. Usually we read and we discuss, or I go over the Federalist Papers paragraph by paragraph, but right now, today we're just reading the text of the Federalist number 10, and we'll revisit it here now after a few videos. So I've got to the paragraph where it starts with, "It must be confessed that in this, as in most other cases, there is a mean, on both sides of which inconveniences will be found to lie. By enlarging too much the number of electors, you render the representative too little acquainted with all their local circumstances and lesser interests, as by reducing it to too much, you render him unduly attached to these and too little fit to comprehend and pursue great national objects. The federal Constitution forms a happy combination in this respect, the great and aggregate interests being referred to the national, the local, and particular to the state legislatures." So this Constitution, the federal Constitution, is a happy medium. It does what the whole nation as a whole, the 13 states, have to do ably. It gives the national government, the federal government, enough power to do what it needs to do, and leaves the rest to the states. Next paragraph, "The other point of difference is the greater number of citizens and extent of territory which may be brought within the compass of Republican than of Democratic government." It's a very important sentence. See, it says Republican government, not a Democratic government. Of course, when he says Democratic, he doesn't say it in the sense that we do now. Okay? Let me repeat this first line again. "The other point of difference is the greater number of citizens and extent of territory which may be brought within the compass of Republican than of Democratic government." In a republic, you can include a lot of people, a large area, he says, a huge population. But in a democratic one, you cannot. Because remember, we talked about pure democracy. That's when all the citizens, or all the free citizens back then, only the males, of course, back then, could vote and would show up and vote. But this is a different, what he calls different scheme, different plan, different proposal. We want you to get representatives, and your representatives will vote for you, represent you. "And it is this circumstance principally which renders factious combinations less to be dreaded in the former than in the latter. The smaller the society, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. The fewer the distinct parties and interests, the more frequently will a majority be found of the same party. And the smaller the number of individuals composing a majority, and the smaller the compass within which they are placed, the more easily they concert and execute their plans of oppression." Okay, this is really important. Just reread this, okay? It's just saying what can happen in a small republic. Okay? A handful, a small group of people can become powerful and really bring oppression on the rest. Extend the sphere and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. This is another line that you'll hear over and over again. It's very important. Extend the sphere. In other words, make sure that the sphere, the area you govern, the size of your country, the size of your republic is extended, is large, and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. Then you will have more of different groups of people that have different interests. You make it less probable that a majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens. Or if such a common motive exists, it will be more difficult for all who feel it to discover their own strength and to act in unison with each other. Think about this. We'll come back. Again, I told you we'll come back and look at these, but I want you to think about it before I talk a lot about it. I've given you some hints, but I think you should just think of societies where there's a small population. What happens? And what happens in a larger city? Let's say in a large city with a large population. Have you noticed that when you live in bigger cities and larger cities, the less you'll know your neighbors, especially if it's a crowded place? Don't focus on them that much. Just think about it. I'm going to leave you with that thought, okay? Because he's getting you to think what would be in the best option for you, and what would be the best option for people in a large area to live under. What kind of government? A government that's a republic or a democracy? So think about that. I'll continue. If such a common motive exists, it will be more difficult for all who feel it to discover their own strength and to act in unison with each other. Act in unison, almost like act in unity. In other words, all of them will vote the same way, will decide the same thing the same way. Okay, I'll continue. Besides other impediments, it may be remarked that where there is a consciousness of unjust or dishonorable purposes, communication is always checked by distrust in proportion to the number whose concurrence is necessary. Concurrence comes from the verb to concur, means to be of the same vote in mind, to agree. So let me read this last sentence again for you to just think it over. Besides other impediments, besides other blocks, other things that block an idea, a motion, a motive, a plan, besides other impediments, it may be remarked that, it might be said that, where there is a consciousness of unjust or dishonorable purposes, communication is always checked by distrust in proportion to the number whose concurrence is necessary. So I will leave the last 3 paragraphs for the next video, and see you then.